when people are actually producing content, they really need to be putting it through the lens of their experts, their people. So it's definitely more human first than business first.
This is Velocitize Talks, and I'm Eric Jones. I'm here with Myles Cameron, who's the head of creative technology at Edelman UK. Myles, it's good to have you.
Thank you for having me.
I wanted to ask you, tell us a little bit about your work here at Edelman in digital capacity and what makes you different from everybody else out there.
So me personally, I actually work with our clients here at Edelman. Obviously, we are the world's largest PR agency. So I have a bit of a different tact when it comes to digital work. I work directly with our global clients to help them understand how we can use technology to get in the earned space. So it's not about buying attention from our audiences, it's actually earning it. So whether it's through influencers or through our media partners. So we really do take a different tact when it comes to actually engaging with our audiences.
You know, in your role as the creative technology head, we've seen studies that suggest Gen Z, the sort of youngest among us, are going to websites increasingly to be entertained, which is a generational gap or shift from prior generations who all go there to be informed. How does that sort of guide some of the work that you do with clients?
Well, I think to add to that as well, the attention span is also dropping as well. So not only do you have to entertain them, but you need to do it quickly. So I think a lot of the time what we're seeing with the younger audiences is we need to do something that's use it through the lens of people that they actually trust and believe in. So whether it's through influencers, some of the younger bloggers or influencers, through to actually creating a story and a narrative around the content that we're driving, and something that they actually believe in. So the content shouldn't just be entertaining, but it also needs to align with their beliefs.
Trust has been something that's been in the news quite a bit over the last year, especially. Obviously, Edelman produces the Trust Barometer, which is 14th year, 15th year now.
Yeah.
And trust has been eroding kind of across the board, you know, in institutions, in the media, and in social media. I wonder if you could comment on that a little bit.
Yeah, so obviously we've seen this rise of fake news. A lot of different content that's coming out isn't being trusted by our audiences. And what we've seen is almost the decline of companies and businesses actually having a voice and more of an incline of actual individuals. People are believing in the CEOs, they're believing in the experts in the industry. So when people are actually producing content, they really need to be putting it through the lens of their experts, their people. So it's definitely more human first than business first.
So a couple of follow-up questions on that. How does that play out in social media?
So we've seen a few different things happen in social media. As I mentioned before, the use of influencers really helps us actually drive messaging. Another big thing that we've seen coming up and rising up is chatbots and the use of actual services that allows us to have a conversation with the audience without necessarily having to pull them away from the platform. And it's a more organic feel when you're actually having a conversation. And we've seen a lot of success with some of our clients, such as Lego, where we actually did a test and learn, because obviously it's such a new platform. We actually created a small prototype for them to trial out. And we actually saw a 6 times turnaround in terms of ROI. So they were actually driving sales through the bot itself.
You referenced branded content earlier. And I know Richard Edelman is fond of saying every company is a media company today.
Yeah.
It used to be brands, when they did content, it was overly self-promotional and it was kind of obvious that it wasn't useful. How do you counsel clients today and sort of their approach to creating useful branded content?
So I think it's definitely people first. So highlighting those people within the business and then highlighting the beliefs of those people. So if you are pushing some content out, making sure it's coming from an authority and coming through a credible voice in the industry, and making sure you have those authoritative voices within your business really just helps drive that messaging.
You know, Edelman's made its name through the amazing work that you do on the earned media front. How are you looking to, from your perspective on the digital side, how are you amplifying some of those earned media hits in a paid media way?
Yeah, so we're actually developing a few different tools in-house using artificial intelligence as well as using our internal expert network. So we've got a couple of tools that we've been building out. One is an influencer focus tool. So it's how do we actually identify the best influencers that we can actually do paid promotions through those influencers themselves. So they'll actually do a post and we'll put paid behind that to amplify their post. The other thing that we're doing is we've built out an audience analysis tool that uses AI. So it can actually understand the personality of the brand and their audience, as well as the tone that they should be going out with. And that allows us to understand who is the right audience we should be targeting. And that we then take that information and we process that through into the paid media space. So then we can go, okay, this is our target audience, this is how we're going to capture them, and this is the types of content we should be using to get them.
From a social perspective, what are some of the key KPIs that you look for to determine the efficacy of a campaign, both from a social perspective and even from a content perspective?
It's definitely, a lot of the time we're looking for change, like a behavioral change. So we'll do an analysis of the audience before, we'll run our campaign and we'll do a test after. So like I said, using some of these AI tools that we can have, we can really understand what's the mentality of our audience, what are the behaviors of that audience, and then we can do a cross comparison before and after. And that really allows us to not just look at, okay, we got this many clicks or this many views, but we actually delivered change for that brand. We actually showed that we were able to change some of the opinions about the brand.
Switching a little bit to e-commerce, it used to be that sort of price was the ultimate sort of winning item, right? Today, it's more about values and identifying with the brand. How are you sort of approaching opportunities in the e-commerce space?
Well, I think one of the biggest news stories recently has been the Nike campaign and just seeing how people have been reacting to the beliefs that they've been rolling out through their influencers. So I think if you look at that, you can really just understand how a brand's beliefs can have an impact on sales, both positively and negatively. I think they've probably seen an uplift in sales, but a lot of people who were polarized against the messaging would have been like destroying the shoes and doing those sorts of things. But one of the things that we've definitely been seeing is the ability to use all of these different platforms to actually drive sales. So as I was mentioning earlier, the Lego bot, using a chat bot to actually drive sales for a brand that has hundreds of thousands of products. It's very confusing for a user to actually know, okay, what shall I buy for my son? What shall I buy for my niece, for my nephew? So we really wanted to try and figure out how we could use technology to solve that problem. And so that we did that through the use of using a chatbot, using different mediums to actually drive those sales.
You had a quote regarding chatbots that sort of said, copy first, code second.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that?
So when we're actually creating chatbots, a lot of the time it's about the storytelling element. We first need to test it. We need to understand what we're actually building is, one, going to work with the audience from a content perspective as well as a narrative perspective. It's very similar to building a website or using multivariate testing. You want to do something small scale and then start building on top of it and making it better and better and better, rather than trying to go out with something big and then failing.
So speaking of a new area where everybody should be testing and learning, voice, one of the hotter areas. The rise of all these digital assistants, Siri, Alexa, Google Home. How should brands begin to think about branding themselves through these voice channels?
Well, I think first things first is they need to be looking at their SEO strategies, because all of these voice platforms are using the existing search platforms to actually uncover content. So you would have started seeing in your Google search or in your Bing search small snippets of content that appear right at the top of the page. These have been developed by Google so that their assistants can actually understand what the user's asking for and can read out that bit of text. So if you're not creating content that can be surfaced by Google, you're not going to be recommended by Google. it's going to be a very, very interesting space to watch, especially if you watched the Google I/O thing in just a few months ago with the duplex piece, and that really sparked a lot of conversations around, okay, where is this going? What should we be doing with this? Because some people are scared, some people are excited. I personally was excited by the whole thought of an assistant that actually sounds like a real person rather than a computer being just voiced through your phone.
How do you think, given the rise of voice and AR, VR, those types of things, how do you think digital experiences will change in the future, right? The sort of very concept of going to a website may be very different in the not too distant future.
Yeah, I think there's a few things that are happening today and over the next couple of years that are really going to change user experience as a whole. So one of those is data privacy. I think you would have already seen the number of websites that have completely changed the experience. You land on a website, now you're bombarded with pop-ups being like, are you sure we can contact you? And that itself has been a massive detriment in terms of user experience, but obviously it's needed from a user privacy standpoint. Another thing that we were talking about recently was the rise of these phablets, these massive phones that are coming out. I was just reading an article the other day about how these phones are getting so big, people can't even carry them. Like, women's pockets aren't built for these phones, and they're getting so big, and people are complaining about how they're actually using them. So I think there's going to be definitely some really interesting things happening in that space in terms of phone sizing, how you can actually engage with people better. For the meantime, I think the main focus is going to be on user experience on mobile devices and understanding what that experience looks like, and data privacy and how we can make the whole experience of being online more secure. Because remembering 20 character long passwords and having different passwords on every single site, it's just a broken system. You need to change that system. We need to figure out how to improve that.
So going in a slightly different direction with the data privacy point, again, I think everybody appreciates having more personalized experiences. Yeah. And there's a balancing act with all of that. How do you navigate those competing interests of privacy and all of the data regulation with personalization? You probably read the same article where somebody tried to, turn off all the cookies and actually go through her day, sort of seeing what life was like without getting, completely tailored, personalized experiences on the web, and how kind of miserable that actually is. How do you think about that?
Yeah, like you said, it's definitely a balancing act, and I think it's very, very important for brands to be completely transparent. And I personally think that over the next 3 years, despite all of the data privacy things, personalization is still going to be driven forwards. I think you've seen the rise of like social logins, and that just really opens up a much bigger portal into data. And the rise of microservices as well, like APIs.
We've all seen the Scott Brinker, reports of MarTech solutions going from, 400 5 years ago to like 7,000 today. You talked about APIs. Do you think open source technology is in a better position given the rise of all these things? Or do you think, people like the comfort of the all-in-one solutions that proprietary solutions often have?
I think there is definitely advantage in the all-in-ones. The biggest problem they've got right now is price. With all of these startup companies, with all of these small little services that people can get at basically for next to nothing, the bigger solutions for the bigger brands, the enterprise brands, and even the medium-sized businesses, they have the advantage in the fact that they are trusted by those companies. So it's definitely something that needs to be watched, because the open source stuff 100% is a very, very interesting space. As I mentioned earlier, with the whole like decentralization and the blockchain technologies that are coming through, that is all around transparency. Mm-hmm. It's all around showing people exactly what's going on behind the scenes. And that's what open source does.
One of the questions we love asking our guests is a book that you'd like to recommend for our viewers.
Yeah.
Any come to mind?
Well, so I've got a couple of books. So one of the books that I read really recently which is not technical related at all, but because I'm in the tech space, I felt like I related it to quite a lot, which is the Rosie Project. I'm not sure if you read it, but it's about an autistic professor. And I just thought it had a really, really interesting human nature element to it, where he was just looking at obvious things that everyone does, but he just saw it in a different way because he had autistic tendencies. So he just saw a different thing. One of the other books that I'm reading right now is Algorithms to Live By. And that just, it's almost like a view from a computer scientist standpoint of how you can use algorithms to automate your life.
Thanks, Myles. Appreciate it. That was Myles Cameron, the head of creative technology for Edelman UK.